Welcome back to the Numis Explorer, the exciting destination for coin collectors, treasure hunters, and anyone fascinated by the possibility of finding valuable American currency hiding in ordinary places. Today, we are exploring the 1969 D Lincoln 1 cent, a coin that has attracted attention because of discussions surrounding rare minting errors, unusual varieties, and extraordinary hypothetical values, including the dramatic claim that a certain example could be worth $258 million. Before we begin, it is important to understand that $258 million is not an established market value for an ordinary 1969 D Lincoln cent, and most examples are worth far less, but the possibility of a truly exceptional error is exactly what makes rare coin hunting so exciting. The 1969 D cent was struck at the Denver Mint, and millions of cents from this era entered circulation, meaning the normal coin itself is not automatically rare simply because it carries the 1969 date and the D Mint mark. What can potentially transform an ordinary-looking penny into a major numismatic discovery is an unusual feature created during the minting process. One of the first things collectors may investigate is doubling. A genuine double die variety can show noticeable separation or duplication in specific design elements, particularly around the date, lettering, or other raised details. However, not every coin that appears doubled is a genuine double die, because mechanical doubling, wear, scratches, and post-mint damage can create misleading appearances. This distinction is extremely important when someone discovers a coin that looks dramatically unusual. Another possibility is an off-center strike, where the blank is improperly positioned when the dies strike it, causing the design to appear shifted toward one side of the coin. The greater the displacement, especially when important design elements remain visible and the error is clearly mint-made, the more interesting the piece can become to collectors. A broad strike is another type of mint error that can occur when a coin is struck without the normal restraining effect of the collar, potentially creating an unusual spread or shape while retaining evidence of the original design. Collectors may also examine the edge and rim for signs of an abnormal strike, because the edge can sometimes provide important clues about how a coin was produced. A clipped planchet is another possibility, occurring when a portion of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, producing a characteristic curved or straight missing section. Struck-through errors can also be fascinating because foreign material can sometimes interfere with the dies during striking, leaving an unusual depression or missing detail on the finished coin. Die cracks, die breaks, cuds, filled die effects, and other abnormalities can also create distinctive characteristics that specialists may investigate. In extremely unusual circumstances, a coin could even be struck on the wrong type of planchet, creating a major mismatch between the expected coin and the metal blank used to produce it. Such errors can be especially interesting because the weight, diameter, thickness, and composition may provide clues about what happened at the mint. This is why anyone who thinks they have a valuable 1969 D cent should not rely only on appearance. A precise weight and careful measurements can be useful, although professional examination is much more reliable for an important discovery. Condition is another major factor. A coin with sharp details, original surfaces, strong luster, and minimal circulation damage can be significantly more desirable than a similar error that has been heavily worn, scratched, cleaned, or damaged. Collectors may pay particular attention to the preservation of Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the date, the rim, and the overall surfaces. Originality matters because cleaning a coin can permanently alter its appearance and may reduce its desirability. If you find a potentially unusual 1969 D cent, resist the temptation to polish it, scrape it, chemically clean it, or otherwise improve its appearance. Leave the coin in its original condition and seek an experienced numismatist or professional authentication service if the characteristics appear genuinely unusual. Another important possibility involves varieties that are not necessarily dramatic errors but may still be recognized by specialists because of differences in dies, spacing, design details, or other production characteristics. Determining whether such a feature is valuable requires comparison with verified examples and reliable references rather than simply looking for any difference from another penny. This is where the real excitement of numismatics begins, because two coins that look almost identical to the casual observer can sometimes have very different collector interest when one contains a confirmed variety or mint error. The dramatic $258 million figure associated with this story should therefore be viewed as a sensational hypothetical rather than a confirmed price for a normal 1969 D cent. A coin would need extraordinary rarity, unquestionable authenticity, exceptional preservation, and powerful collector demand to justify an extreme valuation, and even then an actual selling price would ultimately depend on the market and what qualified buyers were willing to pay. Real-world coin prices are established through evidence, professional grading, auction results, private sales, and collector demand, not simply through online claims or viral headlines. Still, the possibility of discovering a genuine error is what keeps millions of collectors searching through old jars, inherited collections, estate lots, rolls of coins, and everyday change. Imagine finding a 1969 D cent that initially looks completely ordinary, only to notice that the date has unusual doubling, the design is dramatically off-center, the edge shows evidence of an abnormal strike, or the coin appears to have been produced on an unexpected planchet. That kind of discovery could instantly become worth investigating, even if the final value turns out to be much lower than an exaggerated headline suggests. The lesson is simple: do not judge a coin only by its face value. Look carefully, learn the characteristics of genuine mint errors, compare suspicious examples with normal coins, and understand the difference between a manufacturing error and damage that occurred after the coin entered circulation. If you have several 1969 D cents, check them under good lighting and inspect both sides carefully. Look at the date, the D mint mark, Liberty, Indiana, God We Trust, Lincoln's portrait, the rim, and the edge. Check for unusual doubling, missing details, strange shapes, cracks, clips, off-center designs, or evidence that the coin may have been struck on something unusual. Do not assume that discoloration, scratches, dents, or flattened areas are valuable errors, because many of these characteristics are simply signs of circulation or accidental damage. The most valuable discoveries are usually supported by evidence, not imagination. If a coin looks genuinely extraordinary, preserving it properly and obtaining professional evaluation can be far more important than immediately believing a huge price claim. That is the real treasure hunting lesson behind the 1969 D Lincoln cent. An ordinary 1-cent coin can become fascinating when its manufacturing history contains something unusual, rare, and verifiable. So before you spend that old penny, take a second look, because you never know what tiny detail might separate a common coin from a remarkable numismatic discovery. If you enjoy uncovering rare coins, unusual mint errors, hidden varieties, and fascinating American currency stories, make sure you stay connected with the Numis Explorer, subscribe to the channel, and share this video with fellow collectors and treasure hunters. Keep checking your coins, keep learning the difference between genuine errors and post-mint damage, and most importantly, never stop looking, because the next unusual coin could already be sitting inside an old collection, a forgotten coin jar, or even the change in your pocket, Next 1976 1-cent coin. Today, we are taking a close look at the 1976 Lincoln 1 cent and the dramatic claim that a rare example could be worth as much as $250 million because of extraordinary errors, mistakes, or unusual characteristics. Before getting into the possibilities, it is important to understand that a normal 1976 Lincoln cent is not automatically worth millions, and a $250 million valuation is a sensational hypothetical claim rather than an established price for an ordinary example. However, the idea becomes interesting when we consider what could happen if a 1976 cent contained an exceptionally rare and properly authenticated mint error, an unusual variety, or a combination of characteristics that made it extraordinarily desirable to collectors. The 1976 cent was produced during the United States bicentennial era, a period filled with enormous public interest in American history and the nation's 200th anniversary, and Lincoln cents from this year can still be found in collections, old jars, inherited coin boxes, rolls, and sometimes even circulation. Because many were produced, the date alone does not make a 1976 cent rare, but collectors know that production mistakes can create a completely different story. One of the first things to examine is the possibility of a double die. A genuine double die error originates during the die-making process and can cause parts of the design to appear duplicated or noticeably separated. Collectors may carefully inspect the date, Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and other design elements for unusual doubling. The important point is that genuine hub doubling is different from ordinary machine doubling. Mechanical or strike doubling can look impressive to an inexperienced collector but may have little or no premium, while a confirmed double die variety can be much more interesting. This is why photographs alone are not always enough to establish a valuable error. Another possibility is an off-center strike, where the blank does not sit correctly between the dies before the strike occurs. The result can be a Lincoln cent with the design dramatically shifted toward one side, sometimes leaving part of the original blank completely unstruck. The amount of displacement, the visibility of the date, the condition of the coin, and the overall appearance can influence collector interest. A minor shift may not be particularly valuable, but a dramatic, clearly mint-made off-center strike can become a fascinating collectible. There is also the possibility of a broad strike. A normal coin is held within a collar during striking, but if the collar does not function properly, the metal can spread outward and create an unusually wide coin. A genuine broad strike can show clear evidence that the unusual shape occurred during the minting process rather than from someone bending or damaging the coin afterward. Another possibility is a clipped planchet, where a portion of the metal blank is missing before the design is struck. These errors can produce characteristic curved or straight clips, depending on how the blank was cut from the metal strip. Collectors often examine the shape, rim characteristics, and surrounding details to determine whether the missing section is consistent with a genuine mint error. A damaged coin can sometimes look clipped, which is why authentication and careful comparison are important. Struck-through errors are another fascinating category. During production, foreign material can occasionally come between the die and the planchet, preventing part of the design from being struck normally. This may leave a depression, missing detail, or unusual texture that corresponds to the material involved. Depending on the type and severity of the error, collectors may find such a coin especially interesting. Die cracks and die breaks are also possibilities. As dies are used repeatedly, stress can sometimes cause cracks to develop. A crack may appear as a raised line across the design, while a larger die break can produce a significant raised area or cut along the edge. These features can be collectible when they are genuine, dramatic, and clearly connected to the minting process. Another exciting possibility is a wrong planchet strike. This happens when a coin is accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination or type of coin. Such an error can sometimes be identified through unusual weight, thickness, diameter, or metal composition. If a 1976 Lincoln cent were conclusively proven to have been struck on an incorrect planchet, it could become a major numismatic curiosity, especially if the error were extremely rare and the coin remained in excellent condition. Collectors also pay attention to unusual mint marks, missing design elements, die varieties, and other production anomalies, but these features need to be verified carefully. A missing or weak feature is not automatically a valuable error because worn dies, filled dies, grease, circulation damage, or normal production variation can produce similar appearances. The condition of the coin is another critical factor. A 1976 cent with sharp lettering, strong Lincoln details, original surfaces, and little circulation wear may be much more desirable than a heavily damaged example. However, collectors should never clean a potentially valuable coin. Polishing, rubbing, chemicals, or abrasive materials can permanently damage the original surface and make authentication more difficult. If you discover a 1976 cent that looks genuinely unusual, preserve it exactly as you found it and consider professional evaluation. The $250 million figure makes this story sound extraordinary, but it should not be interpreted as a guaranteed value for every 1976 Lincoln cent. In reality, the value of a rare coin depends on authenticity, scarcity, condition, demand, documented sales, and the specific characteristics of the error. An online post or video claiming a huge value is not proof that the coin actually sells for that amount. Serious collectors rely on evidence, recognized references, professional grading, and auction records. Nevertheless, the possibility of a rare mint error is enough reason to examine old coins carefully. Imagine finding a 1976 cent where the design is dramatically off-center, the date displays confirmed doubling, a large portion of the planchet is clipped, or the coin appears to have been struck on an unexpected metal blank. Each of these discoveries would raise questions about how the coin was produced and whether the unusual characteristic can be authenticated. Even when the final value is nowhere near an enormous headline figure, a genuine error can still make the coin more interesting and potentially more valuable than a normal example. This is why collectors use magnification, accurate scales, reference books, comparison photographs, and professional grading services when investigating unusual coins. Weight is especially useful when examining suspected wrong planchet errors because a major difference from the expected specifications can provide an important clue, although weight alone cannot prove the exact error. The edge and rim can also tell a story, particularly when determining whether an unusual shape came from the mint or from damage after circulation. A coin that has been squeezed, flattened, drilled, scratched, or altered can sometimes appear unusual, but these post-mint changes generally do not have the same collector significance as genuine production errors. So, if you have a 1976 Lincoln cent, do not immediately assume it is a fortune, but do not overlook it either. Examine both sides under good lighting, inspect the date and lettering, study Lincoln's portrait, check the rim, look at the edge, and compare the coin with a normal 1976 cent. If you notice something that appears unusual, document what you see without cleaning or altering the coin. The most important question is always whether the feature was created at the United States Mint or happened later. That distinction can completely change the numismatic significance of the coin. A rare mint error is essentially a physical record of something unusual that happened during production, and because each error can be different, collectors are fascinated by the stories these coins can tell. The 1976 cent is particularly interesting because it comes from a historically memorable year, making the search even more exciting for collectors who enjoy both American history and numismatics. The possibility of a spectacular error does not mean that every 1976 penny is valuable, but it does mean that careful examination can be worthwhile. Perhaps the most important lesson is that rarity must be proven. If a coin appears to have a major error, compare it with trusted examples, consult experienced numismatists, and consider professional authentication before accepting extraordinary claims about its value. If an authenticated specimen were ever shown to possess a truly unique combination of major mint errors, extreme rarity, exceptional condition, and strong collector demand, it could certainly attract substantial attention. Whether the final value were hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands, or potentially much more would depend entirely on the evidence and the market. That is what makes coin collecting so exciting. A tiny 1-cent piece can preserve a remarkable story about the manufacturing process and sometimes become much more interesting than its face value suggests. So, before you throw an old 1976 Lincoln cent into a jar of ordinary coins or spend next 2015 D1 cent. Today, we are taking a closer look at the 2015 D Lincoln 1 cent and the dramatic claim that an extraordinary example could be worth as much as $245 million because of rare errors, mistakes, or unusual characteristics. Before we get into the possibilities, remember that $245 million is not an established market price for an ordinary 2015 D Lincoln cent, and most 2015 D cents are worth only their normal face value or a modest premium depending on condition and collector demand. However, the reason this kind of story attracts so much attention is that genuine mint errors can sometimes make modern coins surprisingly collectible, especially when an error is dramatic, rare, and professionally authenticated. The 2015 D cent was produced at the Denver Mint and represents a modern Lincoln cent that can still be found in collections, rolls, coin jars, and sometimes circulation. Because the coin is relatively modern and large numbers were produced, the date and D mint mark alone do not make it a $1 million coin. What matters is whether the particular coin contains a genuine characteristic created during the manufacturing process. One of the first possibilities collectors may investigate is doubling. A genuine double die variety occurs during the creation of a working die and can result in portions of the design showing noticeable separation or duplication. Collectors may carefully examine the date, Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and other design elements under magnification. However, it is extremely important to distinguish genuine double die characteristics from mechanical doubling, die deterioration, scratches, or other forms of damage. A coin that simply looks blurry or doubled in a photograph is not automatically a valuable double die. Another possibility is an off-center strike. This happens when the blank is not correctly positioned between the dies at the moment of striking, causing the design to shift toward one side. A minor displacement may have limited value, but a dramatic and clearly mint-made off-center strike can be much more interesting to collectors, particularly if the date remains visible and the coin retains strong original surfaces. Another error possibility is a broad strike. Normally, the collar helps control the shape and diameter of the coin during striking, but if the collar fails to restrain the planchet properly, the metal can spread outward. A genuine broad strike can therefore have an unusual appearance while still showing clear evidence of a minting error rather than damage after circulation. Collectors may also look for clipped planchets, where a portion of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck. Depending on how the blank was cut from the metal strip, the clip can have a distinctive shape, and the surrounding rim and design can provide clues about whether the feature is genuine. Another intriguing possibility is a struck-through error. During the striking process, foreign material can sometimes interfere between the die and planchet, preventing some details from being transferred correctly. The result can be a depression, missing design, or unusual surface characteristic. Some struck-through errors are subtle, while others can be dramatic enough to attract significant collector attention. Die cracks and die breaks are also worth examining. Repeated use can cause a die to develop cracks, and these may appear as raised lines across the coin's design. A larger die break can create an even more obvious raised area, sometimes called a cud, especially near the rim. The size, location, and clarity of such a feature can affect its desirability. Another major possibility is a wrong planchet error. This occurs when a coin is accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination or another type of coin. Such a mistake can potentially create a significant difference in weight, thickness, diameter, or composition. If a 2015 cent were convincingly proven to have been struck on an incorrect planchet, it could become an unusual and potentially valuable piece because the error would represent a major failure in the normal minting process. Collectors would want to carefully examine the coin's weight and dimensions, although measurements alone cannot prove the exact origin of an error. Professional examination would be necessary to establish authenticity. Another possibility involves missing or weak design elements. Sometimes a coin can appear to have missing letters, numbers, or details because of grease-filled dies, die wear, weak striking pressure, or other production conditions. However, a weak detail is not automatically a valuable error. Collectors must determine whether the characteristic is truly unusual and whether it can be explained by a recognized minting process. This is where experience becomes extremely important. A valuable coin is not simply a coin that looks strange, it is a coin whose unusual characteristics can be explained, verified, and supported by numismatic evidence. The condition of a 2015 cent can also make a major difference in collector interest. Because modern cents can sometimes be found in relatively high grades, collectors may pay attention to coins with sharp details, strong luster, minimal contact marks, and original surfaces. A spectacular error combined with exceptional preservation can be more desirable than a similar error that has been heavily scratched, cleaned, damaged, or worn. This is why you should never clean a coin that you suspect may be valuable. Avoid polishing, rubbing, chemicals, scraping, or abrasive materials because these actions can permanently damage the surface and potentially reduce the coin's collector appeal. If a 2015 cent looks genuinely unusual, protect it and consider having it examined by a qualified numismatist or professional grading and authentication service. The $245 million claim should therefore be understood as a sensational hypothetical figure rather than a guaranteed value. There is no reason to assume that every 2015 D penny is worth millions, and extraordinary valuations require extraordinary evidence. A genuine coin's value depends on factors such as rarity, authenticity, condition, error type, collector demand, and documented market transactions. Auction results and professional evaluations are far more reliable than viral posts that simply place an enormous dollar amount beside a coin's date. Still, the possibility of finding a rare mint error is enough to make searching worthwhile. Imagine opening an old roll of cents and discovering a 2015 D coin with a dramatic off-center strike, a confirmed doubled die characteristic, a substantial clip, an unusual struck-through feature, or evidence that it was struck on an unexpected planchet. Even if the final value were nowhere near $245 million, such a discovery could still be exciting and potentially valuable depending on the error and its authentication. This is why serious collectors inspect their coins carefully rather than judging them only by face value. When examining your 2015 D cent, start with the date and mint mark, then inspect the lettering and Lincoln's portrait. Look for unusual separation in design elements, major shifts in the strike, abnormal rims, missing portions of the planchet, unusual depressions, raised lines, or other features that appear inconsistent with a normal coin. Examine both sides and, if possible, inspect the edge as well. A genuine mint error should have physical characteristics that make sense in relation to the minting process. By contrast, post-mint damage can create countless strange appearances. A coin may have been squeezed, scratched, dropped, chemically altered, heated, flattened, or exposed to harsh conditions after leaving the mint. These conditions can produce shapes and markings that may initially look like errors but usually do not carry the same numismatic significance. Understanding this difference is one of the most important skills for anyone hunting valuable coins. Another key point is that modern coins can still have genuine mint errors. Age is not a requirement for an error coin. A coin from 2015 can potentially be collectible if it contains an authentic and unusual production mistake. In fact, modern manufacturing involves incredibly complex processes, and although quality control is extensive, errors can still escape into circulation or into collector channels. This means treasure hunters should not ignore newer coins simply because they are not old. The 2015 D cent can be a reminder that value sometimes comes from rarity and condition rather than age alone. At the same time, collectors should remain realistic and avoid assuming that every unusual-looking penny is a jackpot. The most reliable approach is careful observation followed by verification. If you believe your coin contains a significant error, photograph it without altering it, record its weight and basic measurements, compare it with trustworthy references, and seek an expert opinion. Do not rely on a random internet comment claiming that your penny is worth millions. A professional assessment can help determine whether the feature is a recognized mint error, a normal production variation, or post-mint damage. If an exceptionally rare 2015 D cent with a major mint error were ever confirmed, its story could attract collectors, researchers, dealers, and auction houses. Next 2002 D 1 cent. Today, we are taking a close look at the 2002 D Lincoln 1 cent and the extraordinary claim that a rare example could be worth as much as $240 million because of errors, mistakes, or unusual minting characteristics. Before we dive into the possibilities, it is important to understand that a normal 2002 D Lincoln cent is not worth $240 million, and this enormous figure should be treated as a sensational hypothetical claim rather than an established market value. Most 2002 D cents are common modern coins, but genuine mint errors can sometimes make individual examples far more interesting to collectors. The excitement comes from the possibility that one coin could have been struck, prepared, or processed differently from the millions of ordinary examples produced during the same year. The 2002 D cent carries the D mint mark indicating production at the Denver Mint, and because the coin is relatively modern, many examples remain in collections, rolls, jars, and circulation. The date itself does not make the coin rare, but an authentic and unusual mint-made error could potentially change its collector significance. One of the first characteristics treasure hunters may examine is doubling. A genuine double die variety occurs because of a problem during die creation, and it can cause portions of the design to show distinct separation or duplication. Collectors may inspect the date, Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and other design elements under magnification. However, this is where careful research becomes extremely important because not every coin that appears doubled is a valuable double die. Mechanical doubling, die deterioration, worn dies, scratches, and other forms of damage can create misleading appearances. A genuine double die characteristic needs to be consistent with the way the die was manufactured and should be compared with reliable examples before anyone makes a major valuation claim. Another possibility is an off-center strike. During normal production, a blank is positioned between the dies before the striking process, but if the blank shifts out of position, the resulting coin can have its design dramatically displaced toward one side. A minor off-center strike may have limited collector interest, while a dramatic example can be much more desirable, particularly when the date and mint mark remain visible and the error is clearly the result of the minting process. The degree of displacement, the condition of the coin, and the overall appearance can all affect its significance. Another interesting possibility is a broad strike, which can occur when the collar that normally restrains the planchet does not function properly during striking. The metal can spread outward, producing an unusual shape while still preserving recognizable details from the original design. A genuine broad strike can be fascinating because the abnormal shape was created at the mint rather than through damage after circulation. Collectors may also investigate clipped planchets. A clipped planchet occurs when part of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, creating a characteristic missing section. The shape and appearance of the clip, the rim, and the surrounding design can help specialists determine whether it is likely to be a genuine mint-made error. Not every missing-looking section is a clip, because coins can be damaged after leaving the mint, so authentication remains important. Struck-through errors are another possibility that can create unusual features on a 2002 cent. If foreign material becomes trapped between the die and the planchet during striking, it can interfere with the transfer of the design. The resulting coin may show missing details, unusual depressions, or distinctive surface characteristics. Some struck-through errors are subtle, while others can be dramatic enough to attract considerable collector attention. Die cracks and die breaks can also be found on coins when dies experience stress or deterioration during production. A die crack may appear as a raised line crossing the design, while a larger die break can create a substantial raised area, sometimes producing a cut along the edge. The location, size, and clarity of such a feature can affect how interesting the coin is to collectors. Another major possibility is a wrong planchet error, where a coin is accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination or type of coin. Such an error could potentially be identified through unusual weight, thickness, diameter, or composition. If a 2002 Lincoln cent were convincingly proven to have been struck on an incorrect planchet, it could become a fascinating numismatic discovery because it would represent a major deviation from the normal production process. However, weight and measurements alone do not prove a wrong planchet error, and professional analysis would be necessary to determine what actually happened. Collectors may also look for unusual rims, missing details, weak lettering, die deterioration, and other production anomalies, but these characteristics must be interpreted carefully. A weakly struck area is not automatically a valuable error. Grease-filled dies, worn dies, insufficient striking pressure, and normal production variations can all cause details to appear weak or incomplete. The important question is whether the characteristic represents a recognized and genuine mint error or simply normal variation or damage. Condition can also play an important role. A 2002 cent with sharp design details, strong original luster, clean surfaces, and minimal circulation wear may be more desirable than a heavily worn or damaged example. If the coin also contains a significant and authenticated mint error, the combination of rarity and preservation can make it particularly interesting. This is why collectors should never clean a potentially valuable coin. Polishing, rubbing, scratching, chemicals, or abrasive materials can permanently alter the surface and potentially reduce the coin's desirability. If you discover a 2002D cent that looks genuinely unusual, it is better to preserve it as found and seek a qualified professional opinion. The dramatic $240 million figure should not be used as a guaranteed price. Real coin values are determined through evidence, rarity, authenticity, condition, collector demand, and actual transactions. An online listing or viral video can claim almost any price, but an asking price is not the same as a confirmed sale. For a coin to command an extraordinary valuation, there would need to be extraordinary evidence showing that it is genuinely rare and desirable. This is especially important with modern cents because millions of normal examples exist. The rarity must come from something specific about the individual coin, such as a confirmed major mint error, an exceptionally scarce variety, or an unusual combination of characteristics. Imagine, for example, discovering a 2002D cent with a dramatic off-center strike where a significant portion of the design is displaced but the date remains clearly visible. That would immediately make the coin worth investigating. Imagine finding another example with an authentic double die characteristic that matches a recognized variety. Or imagine discovering a cent with a substantial clipped planchet, a major struck-through error, or evidence that it was struck on an incorrect blank. Each scenario would raise questions about the coin's production history, and the answers could determine its numismatic significance. This is why experienced collectors do not simply look at the face value. They study the manufacturing process and ask what happened to the coin before it left the mint. When examining your own 2002D cent, start with the date and mint mark, then carefully inspect Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the rim, and the edge. Look for unusual doubling, major design displacement, abnormal shapes, missing sections, raised die cracks, strange depressions, and other features that seem inconsistent with a normal example. Compare the suspicious coin with a standard 2002D cent whenever possible. This comparison can help reveal whether something is genuinely unusual or simply the result of lighting, wear, photography, or damage. Good lighting and magnification can help, but they cannot replace professional authentication. One of the biggest mistakes new collectors make is assuming that any strange-looking coin is automatically rare. A coin can become damaged in countless ways after leaving the mint. It may be scratched, bent, squeezed, heated, chemically discolored, flattened, or exposed to harsh environments. These post-mint alterations can create spectacular appearances but usually do not have the same significance as genuine mint errors. Understanding this difference is one of the most valuable skills in coin hunting. The story of the 2002D cent also demonstrates why modern coins deserve attention. Some collectors assume that only very old coins can be valuable, but that is not necessarily true. A modern coin can become collectible because of a rare error, variety, or exceptional condition. The age of the coin is only one part of the story. What matters most is rarity, authenticity, demand, and the specific characteristics of the piece. The possibility of finding a valuable error in a modern cent is one reason people continue checking pocket change, rolls, collections, and inherited coin jars. Even when the final value is nowhere near an next 2010D 1 cent cent. Today, we are taking a closer look at the 2010D Lincoln 1 cent and the extraordinary claim that a rare example could be worth as much as $235 million because of errors, mistakes, or unusual characteristics. Before we explore the possibilities, it is important to clarify that $235 million is not an established market value for an ordinary 2010D Lincoln cent, and most examples are worth only their normal face value or a modest premium depending on condition and collector interest. The real excitement comes from the possibility of discovering a genuine mint error or unusual variety that makes one individual coin substantially different from the millions of normal examples produced. The 2010D cent was struck at the Denver Mint, and because it is a modern coin, many examples can still be found in collections, coin jars, rolls, inherited accumulations, and sometimes everyday change. The date and D mint mark by themselves do not make this coin rare, but unusual characteristics created during the minting process can potentially give a particular example additional numismatic interest. One of the first possibilities collectors may investigate is a double die variety. A genuine double die originates during the die-making process and can produce visible separation or duplication in portions of the design. Collectors may carefully examine the date, Liberty, Indiana God We Trust, and other lettering under magnification. However, it is essential to distinguish genuine double die characteristics from mechanical doubling, die deterioration, scratches, and post-mint damage. A blurry or flattened appearance is not automatically evidence of a valuable double die. Genuine varieties need to be compared with reliable references and, for important discoveries, authenticated by specialists. Another possibility is an off-center strike, which occurs when the blank is not correctly positioned between the dies when the coin is struck. This can cause the design to appear shifted toward one side, sometimes leaving a portion of the blank without any design. A minor off-center strike may have limited interest, while a dramatic mint-made displacement can be considerably more desirable, especially if the date and mint mark remain visible. The amount of displacement, overall condition, and clarity of the error can all influence collector interest. Another fascinating possibility is a broad strike. Normally, a collar helps contain the planchet during striking and helps establish the proper diameter and shape. If the collar fails to function correctly, the metal can spread outward during the strike, creating an unusually broad coin. A genuine broad strike can be interesting because its unusual shape was created during the minting process rather than through accidental damage after the coin entered circulation. Collectors may also search for clipped planchets. A clipped planchet occurs when a portion of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck, creating a characteristic curved or straight missing area. The shape of the clip and the surrounding rim and design details can provide clues about whether the feature is a genuine mint error. Not every missing section is a true clip, because coins can be damaged after production, so careful examination is necessary. Another possible error is a struck-through coin. During the striking process, foreign material can sometimes interfere between the die and the planchet. When this happens, the material can prevent part of the design from being transferred normally, leaving an unusual depression, missing detail, or distinctive texture. Some struck-through errors are subtle, while others can be dramatic enough to attract collector attention. Die cracks and die breaks are additional possibilities. As dies are used repeatedly, stress can sometimes create cracks in the die, and those cracks can appear as raised lines on the finished coin. A larger break can produce a more substantial raised area, sometimes called a cud, especially near the edge. These characteristics can be collectible when they are clearly mint-made, unusual, and properly identified. Another major possibility is a wrong planchet strike. This occurs when a coin is accidentally struck on a blank intended for another denomination or another type of coin. A wrong planchet error can sometimes produce differences in weight, thickness, diameter, or composition. If a 2010 D Lincoln cent were proven to have been struck on an incorrect planchet, it could become a particularly interesting numismatic discovery because such an error would represent a major departure from the normal production process. However, weight alone cannot establish the exact error, and professional examination is necessary to determine the coin's composition and production history. Collectors may also investigate unusual rims, missing details, weak strikes, die deterioration, and other production anomalies. A weak feature does not automatically mean the coin is valuable. Grease-filled dies, worn dies, insufficient striking pressure, and normal manufacturing variation can all cause details to appear weak or incomplete. The key question is whether the characteristic represents a genuine and recognized mint error or merely normal variation. This distinction is extremely important because the Internet contains many exaggerated claims about modern coins. A coin may look unusual under certain lighting or magnification but still be completely normal. Another important factor is condition. A 2010 D cent with strong details, original surfaces, attractive luster, and minimal circulation damage may be more desirable than a heavily worn example. If an exceptional error is combined with exceptional preservation, collector interest can increase even further. This is why anyone who thinks they have found a valuable 2010 cent should avoid cleaning it. Polishing, rubbing, scraping, chemicals, or abrasive materials can permanently damage the original surfaces and may make professional authentication more difficult. Keep a potentially unusual coin in its original condition and seek a qualified numismatic opinion. The $235 million claim should therefore be treated as a dramatic hypothetical rather than a guaranteed value. Real coin values are determined by rarity, authenticity, condition, collector demand, documented transactions, and the specific characteristics of the coin. A price mentioned in a video, social media post, or online listing does not prove that a coin actually sold for that amount. Extraordinary valuations require extraordinary evidence. For a modern 2010 cent to command an enormous price, there would need to be something truly exceptional about the individual specimen, such as a major and authenticated mint error, extreme rarity, remarkable preservation, or an unusual combination of characteristics that collectors strongly desire. Imagine finding a 2010 cent with a dramatic off-center strike where a significant part of the design is displaced while the date remains visible. That would immediately make the coin worth investigating. Imagine another example with clearly confirmed double die characteristics, a substantial clipped planchet, a dramatic struck-through error, or evidence that the cent was struck on an incorrect planchet. Each situation would tell a different story about what happened during the minting process. The purpose of careful coin examination is to determine whether the unusual feature was actually created at the mint. Post-mint damage can produce countless strange appearances. A coin may have been bent, scratched, squeezed, heated, chemically altered, flattened, or damaged by machinery after leaving the mint. These alterations can look dramatic, but they generally do not have the same collector significance as genuine mint errors. Learning to separate mint-made errors from post-mint damage is one of the most important skills for any serious treasure hunter. When examining a 2010 Lincoln cent, start by checking the date and mint mark. Then inspect Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the rim, and both sides of the coin. Look for unusual doubling, major shifts in the design, missing portions, strange depressions, raised die cracks, abnormal rims, or other characteristics that seem inconsistent with a normal example. Compare the coin with a standard 2010 cent whenever possible. Comparison is extremely useful because it helps reveal whether a suspected feature is genuinely unusual or simply part of normal production. A digital scale can also be helpful when investigating a possible wrong planchet error, although measurements should be considered evidence rather than final proof. Professional authentication can determine whether the coin's composition, dimensions, strike, and other characteristics are consistent with a particular error. Modern coins deserve attention because age is not the only factor that creates rarity. A coin from 2010 can potentially be valuable if it contains a rare and authenticated mint error. The complex manufacturing process used to produce coins involves many stages, and although quality control is extensive, mistakes can occasionally escape into circulation. That is why collectors continue examining modern cents instead of focusing exclusively on old coins. Even when a coin is not worth a fortune, identifying a genuine error can make it much more interesting and potentially more valuable than a normal example. If you believe your last 1971 1-cent coin. Today, we are taking a close look at the 1971 Lincoln 1 cent and the extraordinary claim that a rare example could be worth as much as $230 million because of unusual errors, mistakes, or other remarkable characteristics. Before we explore this exciting possibility, it is important to understand that a normal 1971 Lincoln cent is not worth $230 million, and such an enormous figure should be considered a sensational hypothetical claim rather than an established market price for an ordinary example. The real reason collectors become interested in a 1971 cent is the possibility that a particular coin may contain a genuine mint error, rare variety, unusual strike, or exceptional condition that separates it from the millions of ordinary cents produced during that period. The year 1971 is already interesting to Lincoln cent collectors because the coins belong to an era when pennies were being produced in very large quantities, meaning the date itself does not automatically make a coin rare. What makes an individual specimen special is what happened to it during manufacturing and whether that unusual characteristic can be proven to be genuine. One of the first possibilities collectors may investigate is doubling. A genuine double die variety can occur during the preparation of the coin die and may create visible separation or duplication in portions of the design. Collectors often examine the date, Liberty, Indiana, God We Trust, and other lettering under magnification. However, this is also one of the easiest areas for beginners to misunderstand, because mechanical doubling, die deterioration, scratches, and circulation damage can sometimes imitate the appearance of a doubled die. A genuine double die characteristic should be consistent, identifiable, and supported by reliable numismatic evidence rather than simply appearing blurry or doubled in a photograph. Another possibility is an off-center strike, which happens when the blank is not positioned correctly between the dies during striking. When this occurs, the design can be shifted toward one side, leaving part of the coin without the expected design. A minor off-center strike may not be especially valuable, but a dramatic and clearly mint-made example can attract much greater attention. The visibility of the date and mint mark, the percentage of displacement, the overall condition, and the clarity of the error can all influence collector interest. A broad strike is another fascinating minting possibility. During normal production, the collar helps restrain the planchet and establish its proper diameter and shape. If the collar fails to operate correctly when the dies strike the blank, the metal can spread outward and create a coin that appears wider or differently shaped than normal. A genuine broad strike is interesting because the unusual shape was created during the minting process rather than by someone damaging the coin afterward. Collectors may also search for clipped planchets. A clipped planchet occurs when a section of the metal blank is missing before the coin is struck. The resulting coin may have a distinctive curved or straight missing portion, and specialists can examine the surrounding rim and design for evidence that the clip occurred during the manufacturing process. Not every coin with a missing-looking section is a genuine clipped planchet because post-mint damage can produce similar results, so careful verification is essential. Another possibility is a struck-through error. If foreign material becomes trapped between the die and the planchet during striking, it can prevent the die from transferring some of the normal design. This may leave behind a depression, missing detail, unusual texture, or other evidence of interference during the strike. Some struck-through errors are minor, while others can be dramatic and highly interesting to collectors. Die cracks and die breaks can also create distinctive characteristics on Lincoln cents. As a die is repeatedly used, stress can sometimes produce cracks, which may appear on the finished coin as raised lines. When a die break becomes larger, it can create a substantial raised area, particularly around the rim, sometimes known as a cud. The size, location, and clarity of the feature can influence its desirability, but again, the feature must be genuine and mint-made. Another major possibility is a wrong planchet strike. This occurs when a coin is struck on a blank intended for another denomination or type of coin. Such an accident can potentially produce differences in weight, thickness, diameter, or metal composition. If a 1971 Lincoln cent were convincingly proven to have been struck on an incorrect planchet, it could become a fascinating and potentially valuable numismatic discovery because the mistake would represent a major deviation from the normal production process. However, a different weight by itself does not prove a wrong planchet error, and professional examination would be necessary to determine exactly what happened. Collectors may also investigate weak strikes, missing details, filled die effects, unusual rims, and other production abnormalities. A weak design does not automatically mean that a coin is rare or valuable. Grease-filled dies, worn dies, insufficient striking pressure, and normal production variations can all cause certain details to appear weaker than expected. This is why serious collectors look for evidence that connects the unusual feature to a specific minting process. Condition is another important factor. A 1971 cent with sharp design details, attractive original surfaces, strong luster, and minimal circulation where can be more desirable than a similar coin that has been heavily scratched, cleaned, corroded, or damaged. If an unusual mint error is combined with exceptional preservation, collector interest can increase significantly. This is why anyone who suspects they have a valuable 1971 cent should avoid cleaning it. Polishing, rubbing, chemical treatment, scraping, or abrasive materials can permanently alter the coin and potentially reduce its desirability. The best approach is to preserve the coin in its original condition and seek professional evaluation if its characteristics appear genuinely unusual. The dramatic $230 million figure should not be treated as a guaranteed price. Real coin values are established through rarity, authenticity, condition, demand, documented auction results, and actual transactions. An online listing can display an enormous asking price, but that does not mean someone has actually paid that amount for the coin. For an extraordinary valuation to be credible, there would need to be extraordinary evidence showing that the coin is exceptionally rare, authentic, desirable, and supported by a strong market. This distinction is especially important for modern and relatively common Lincoln cents, because the vast majority of examples remain ordinary. The rarity must come from something unique about the individual coin. Imagine discovering a 1971 cent with a dramatic off-center strike that leaves a large portion of the planchet blank while the date remains clearly visible. That would immediately make the coin worth investigating. Imagine finding another example with strong, confirmed double die characteristics in important parts of the design. Or imagine discovering a cent with a substantial clip, a dramatic struck-through error, a significant die break, or evidence that it was struck on an unexpected planchet. Each of these situations could create a fascinating story about the coin's journey through the minting process. The important question is always whether the unusual feature was created at the mint or after the coin entered circulation. Post-mint damage is extremely common and can produce appearances that seem spectacular at first. A coin can be scratched, bent, squeezed, flattened, heated, chemically discolored, or damaged by machinery. Such damage may look unusual, but it generally does not have the same collector significance as an authentic mint error. Learning to identify the difference between manufacturing errors and post-mint damage is one of the most valuable skills a coin hunter can develop. When examining a 1971 Lincoln cent, begin with the date and carefully inspect every part of the design. Look at Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the rim, the edge, and both sides of the coin. Use magnification when appropriate, but remember that magnification can make ordinary surface damage look dramatic. Compare the coin with a normal 1971 cent so you can determine whether the feature is truly different. If you have access to an accurate scale, measuring the weight can provide useful information when investigating a possible planchet error, although weight alone cannot prove what happened. Professional authentication can examine the coin's composition, dimensions, strike characteristics, surface condition, and other details to determine whether the unusual feature is genuine. Another important lesson is that age does not automatically equal value. A 1971 penny is more than 50 years old, but millions of examples exist, so most are not rare simply because they have been around for decades. The valuable possibilities come from rarity, error type, condition, and demand. This is why collectors can spend hours examining coins that look completely ordinary. The smallest difference can sometimes reveal a major production mistake, but that difference must be understood and verified. If an exceptionally rare 1971 cent with a major mint error were authenticated,